Hello and welcome back, adventurers. I see you back for more. Well, let me tell you about a bloody history of Forlorn where no one can escape with their innocence. The mists revealed Forlorn in 547 Barovian calendar, and for most historians, this remains the only significant date of Forlorn's existence. Count Strahd apparently saw so little value or interest in the blighted land that he made no effort to add it to his holdings, and no ruler of any land has formed a contradictory opinion. Forfarians themselves, either in defiance to his opinions or in their zeal to preserve the memory of their homeland, refused to use Barovian calendar, instead continuing to use the calendar of Forfar. The Forfarian calendar marks the current year as 2143. The seeds of the Forfarian fall were sown in the winter of 1593, when the barony of the Western Highlands went to war with the March of Gautier. The war broke out at an inopportune time for the Ablancs, the ruling family. The Baron of Forfar, Gillian Ablanc, was making preparations for his daughter Flora's marriage to Rivellin ap Tosh. Both of the youths were widely popular among the townsfolk of Burnham, and their impending wedding had the people more interested than warfare. The wedding occurred, and the people of Forfar celebrated, but the joy was overshadowed by the spectre of the upcoming war. The newlyweds were separated after only a few weeks together, as Rivellin rode off with the other soldiers of Forfar to fight against the Gautierans. Rivellin's skill and heroism proved to be pivotal. In this first battle against the Gautierans, he single-handedly slew the ruler of the March. The Gautieran soldiers wavered and were finally routed when Highland druids created torrential storm. Rivellin, seeing the enemy flee, led the Highlanders in, charging them down. The storm proved to be a double-edged sword, however, as the Highland armies became confused and scattered, losing sight of the fleeting Gautierans and each other. Rivellin was among many lost in the storm. According to the Forfarians, Flora refused to believe that Rivellin had truly died and was convinced that her husband would return to her soon. Matters were made worse for a few weeks later when a townsman claimed to have seen Rivellin wandering the streets of Burnham at night, his clothing torn and stained and his eyes wild. Few paid attention to these ramblings, but they were all that Flora needed. She took to walking the streets at night, hoping to catch a glimpse of her missing husband. Her parents, fearing that she had gone mad, tried to keep her from going on these nightly searches, but Flora would not be deterred, her persistence paying off in the end. Rivellin had indeed died in battle against the Gautierans, but rose again as a vampire and returned to Burnham to feed on the blood of its people. When he came upon Flora, he stole her soul with his infernal powers and used her to conceal his presence from the locals. Each night thereafter, Rivellin would emerge to find a victim, returning to the shelter of Ablanc Hall before dawn. Soon, Flora even found herself carrying the undead Rivellin's child. The monster was too arrogant to spend much effort concealing its crimes, and the people of Burnham soon realized that an undead horror was stalking them. A group of undead hunters organized to find the creature. Rivellin fled into the forest outside Burnham, while bewitched Flora went to her father begging for his assistance. The good Baron refused, and the hunters returned a few days later with the vampire's decapitated corpse. It was hoped that Rivellin's death would free Flora from his wicked influence, but it became clear that this hope was in vain. When the headless body was brought back to Ablanc Hall, Flora threw herself upon it, sobbing. Her continued loyalty to the undead beast, coupled with her visible pregnancy, convinced the townsfolk that Flora was herself permanently tainted. The people would have destroyed her at that moment were it not for the Baron, who despite his own fears was not willing to see his daughter killed. The people reluctantly let Flora alone, but their anxiety remained and began to fester. When Flora's child was finally born in the winter of 1594, the townsfolk were no longer willing to remain idle in the face of her corruption. They stormed Ablanc Hall, but Flora escaped with her child and fled into surrounding forests. In her flight, she came to a sacred grove at the top of the hill, tended and warded by a group of druids. With the townsfolk on her trail, Flora desperately shoved her child into the arms of Ruel, one of the druids, and begged her to hide it. The townsfolk finally caught up to her at the grove, and she tried to appeal to their senses to at least spare her son Tristan. She was hung from one of the sacred oaks, in the hope that its holiness would cleanse her soul after death. The druids took the infant away, so that they could properly take care of the boy, and the people of Burnham relaxed in the knowledge that the three evils that has plagued their town were finally placed to rest. Yet all did not go back to normal. In 1609, the body of the druid Ruel was found beside the oak that has served as Flora's gallows. Her throat has been torn out and her flesh covered in horrible wounds. No murderer was found, but the people of Burnham thought that it was Flora's ghost, taking revenge on the druid for failing to protect her child. After Ruel's death, uneasiness seemed to settle on the grove. The druids sensed the presence of evil and abandoned it, and with their absence, the evil of the grove only grew. 9 years later, the entire grove was engulfed in a mysterious fire. As flames spread, a hideous, inhuman scream of pain rose above the crackle of fire and lasted for hours. When the flames died down, every tree in the grove has been reduced to ash, save one, Flora's oak. After that fateful night, wolves started stalking not just animals, but humans as well. In 1637, the situation turned worse. People were beginning to forget Flora, until her parents died only days apart. Neither had shown any signs of illness, and it was whispered that Flora's ghost had taken 2 more victims. The Baron had no heir, so Blaine ap Fit, the leader of powerful ap Fit family, was given the title. The ap Blancs, meanwhile, did not disappear entirely. In 1809, a distant cousin came to Burnham to assert claim to the ap Blanc holdings. Known only as Lord ap Blanc, the handsome and charismatic young minstrel intended to settle down and establish an estate on the outskirts of Burnham. He married a local priest named Isolde ap Way, and the couple had 3 children. The whole family died in a tragic accident throughout 2 decades. Youngest son Julian fell prey to the wolves as he tried to protect his dog. Second son Morholt was killed by his own mentor and friend, while Brangane, the couple's only daughter, has disappeared into the night. Isolde couldn't cope with the loss of her children and ended her life as she jumped out of the Lord's Tower. No one heard from the minstrel ever since. In 1906, a second ap Blanc came to Burnham. Mark ap Blanc was the great-grandson of the Lord ap Blanc. His grandmother, the youngest daughter of minstrel, called Brangane, fled somewhere, establishing her own family. Mark proved to have a treacherous streak and immediately embarked on an ambitious expansion of the Lord's Tower. In Mark's tyrannical search for power, one deed actually stands out. He has ordered to slay all the ap Fits to the last, culminating in the Year of Woe, the year when the land was engulfed by mists. Many Farfarians fled to the new lands away from the pain of this one. First they settled in a mole in Barovia, and then spread through the core. Now only the druids remain in the forests, trying to reclaim what the evil has taken from them. Barovian civil authorities and cartographers has twisted an unfamiliar language of Farfarians, recording their homeland simply as Forlorn. Surprisingly, the name stuck, and with a generation, the Farfarians called the region Forlorn as well. Interestingly enough, Druidic records make note of the year 622 Barovian calendar, when the castle Tristinora became the center of flurry of goblin activity as they worked to expand the structure, adding Barbican that lies in the castle's front. In 688, the hamlet of Forfarmax was settled just across Forlorn's southern border. This new influx of Farfarian blood led to a new surge of growth in the Farfarian diaspora across the southern core, as well as the rebirth in the fate of the old gods of the Druidic pantheon. Thank you so much, my patient listeners. This concludes a history lesson of Forlorn. Please join me next time when we talk about people and goblins that call this land home.